We talked about Sinister about a month ago, a couple episodes ago.
Yeah.
On our Tuesdays. And this is the same creative team. It's directed by Scott Derrickson. It's written by Scott Derrickson and C. Robert Cargill, who I stupidly called C. Scott Cargill. But to pump myself up a little bit, my little hit of dopamine for the month, I tweeted about this episode from my personal account.
The Sinister episode?
Yeah, I've just been trying to do a little more promotion on that hellscape. And he liked the tweet, which is pretty cool.
Very cool.
But this story is adapted. Scott Derrickson and C. Robert Cargill are writing this story, adapting it from Joe Hill's short story, The Black Phone.
And as we know, short stories are like some of the best things for horror, I think, because they're small. And that's why I love reading Stephen King short stories. Like I think they make for really good movies as well.
I only have 4 things to say about this. This is an incredible movie, and coming out of
Hey Kim, what's this movie called?
The Black Phone. I said that before.
No, you didn't.
It's only it's an hour and 43 minutes. So if you cut credits out of that, and there's a whole intro kind of title sequence, you see all the credits up front.
It's really good.
If you cut all that out, it's like an hour 35.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And to piggyback off of what you said, I forgot to do the elevator pitch.
Oh,
Black
sorry.
Phone. It's a movie about a guy who abducts kids.
Yeah.
He's called The Grabber.
Yeah.
That's it. It's a horror movie in the 70s. The bad guy's called The Grabber.
Yeah.
It stars a bunch of kids. That's all you need to know.
Are we going to spoil the movie in this discussion?
Yeah.
Can we? Is it possible for us to... We should have said
If
this
my
before.
energy in 99 Degree Heat has not sold you on this fucking movie, then turn the episode off.
I was going to say, should we try and like save spoilers for the end, or is it just unavoidable
I'll
for you?
gatekeep it when I do it.
Okay, that sounds good.
Gatekeep. I will signpost
gatekeeping spoilers in this. Okay.
Signpost gatekeep. I'll signpost it when I do spoil it.
I mean, if you're one of those people that like doesn't want to know anything, then why are you listening to this episode? You're stupid. But
this first point doesn't require any sort of spoilers.
Great.
So just because you mentioned it, short stories versus novels. Because watching this movie, I was fully engrossed. And then the second I got out of it, I had thoughts. I was comparing it to other adaptations in the world of horror that we've seen. And I think unavoidably it was in my mind a lot.
I mean, there are so many parallels to it. I mean, the whole thing had a Stephen King vibe to it, which is understandable. I mean, it still very much felt like its own thing. But, I mean, the biggest things are some of just the small things, like the details, like the yellow raincoat, the balloons,
like child killings.
Yeah, children going missing. You know, the abusive alcoholic father. There's a clairvoyance element, like these like supernaturally Stephen King-y, especially it. Elements, which I really enjoyed. I think, which is especially appropriate right now when we just had the new It adaptations, this like resurgent, like this cultural resurgence of,
and those became the best, the most successful R-rated movies of all time.
Right, and then you also have. I always think you can't talk about the new It adaptation without talking about Stranger Things. Number one, there's actor crossover. Yeah. Number two, it's group of kids in the 80s and they're friends and they're funny and they swear at each other and there's like this like camaraderie. I mean, there's not as much of that in this movie, but it's there. And I don't know how much I can talk about it because I've only seen one season of Stranger Things. Sorry. But it's interesting that I think this is a great 2022 movie. Like I think it fits perfectly in like the cultural zeitgeist for right now. Not that that has to matter, but it just happens to work out.
Stranger Things is still at the absolute center of the cultural zeitgeist.
Yeah.
Season 4 was unbelievably successful.
Yeah.
Billions of minutes were watched. It broke all the streaming records.
Yeah.
So it's absolutely still at the forefront of people's minds and interests. To center it more around the short story novel thing.
Yeah.
Comparing it as an adaptation, being 2 movies. I loved the
and
movies.
being a 1,500 page book or whatever it is.
And I loved those movies. The first one is better, but that's okay. The first part of the book's better.
Yeah, that's true.
The thing that I can never get out of my mind with those adaptations is how eager the director seemed to do a director's cut that blended the 2 movies together into basically a miniseries.
Yeah.
And he always talked about wanting that to be like a DVD extra, something he could release after the fact, after it left theaters. And that hasn't happened yet, but that's all I think about. Yeah. I just want to see that version because it is a complex, long story.
Yeah, it's hard to wrap it up in 1 or 2 movies. Yeah,
and the movie's great.
Yeah.
But there's just so much. And the advantage here for The Black Phone is that this story feels absolutely complete at an hour and 43 minutes.
I mean, it's an incredibly simple concept. I mean, it's not simple in its execution or its impact, but it's not, there's not the multiple timelines, a million different characters. Like, it's one main character, one main villain. There's one thing happening. Right.
And I would imagine most of the major beats of the story are in here. We haven't read it yet. I think you said you wanted to.
I do want to, yeah. Oh, yeah. I told myself I was going to... Well, I was going to read it, but then we decided to record today instead of, next week, so that's
The advantage, though, is that you have room for expansion and embellishment. Instead of always cutting things down and simplifying and removing nuance, as much as you try to retain complexity and character, you are always shaving things down.
Right, but here you have more room to expand and to...
Right.
To embellish, which is
and
fun.
Even if you're not embellishing, even if you're just going with what's there in the existing story, you have time to let those moments breathe.
Yes.
Especially in a horror movie, you can act out the tension. You can build the slow moments and the drama to the point that, I really love the collection of horror movies we've talked about in Summerween.
Me too.
I feel like this film fits perfectly next to Hush, Sinister, Funny Games, Mungo, The Ritual, because it has that same captivating slow burn immersion. There was a patience in the way the movie was crafted.
Yeah.
It was so much about atmosphere. There was that almost theatricality that we've played with so much. And here, I think, instead of Funny Games having a static shot on a kitchen for 10 minutes so you can see the emotional blowout after something horrible happens, here, a lot of that extra time is used to build up the period piece. To establish that time and setting, the flourishes and detail of the era, the clothes, the kind of sepia filter on all of it. I thought that was intoxicating.
Yeah.
And with Stranger Things being such a runaway success, I mean, going on 10 years since the first. It's not a thing that releases every year.
Yeah, it's been ongoing for several years. Yeah.
Those moments of lived-in period piece kind of cultural nuggets and Easter eggs, those are delightful, they're beloved, and they're magnetic. People just, even a couple songs that they shouted out in this movie or played, it just hooks people.
Yeah.
And it engages older people, and for young people, it gets them into that music in that era.
That's true.
So it becomes more of a factor in your life than just like Possum, which is a movie that is esoteric and weird and dark and contained and theatrical and specifically made for me. Stranger Things is made for everyone.
Yeah, right.
At some point, there's an advantage to appealing to more than just me.
Yeah.
And this film almost felt like, and I want to get your thoughts on this, it almost felt like a YA horror.
Because it features a young main character?
Because of the period piece, the age of the main characters, and just the energy of it. Because there's scary shit, but it's mostly suggestive.
I was going to say, it's not about not in response to your YA comment, but just what you were saying about it being like this slow burn thing. It's a very restrained movie.
Right.
And I like that you brought up Funny Games. It's a lot like Funny Games in that you don't see a ton of violence. I mean, this movie was really scary, and I was on the edge of an anxiety attack the entire time we were watching. And then as we were leaving, I was shaky. It really unsettled me. It was a scary movie, but you don't see much violence because a lot of it is in your imagination because that's the way kids think. I'm trying to respond to your thing, but also I have my own idea of what to talk about. But the YA thing, I can see that.
If you were 12 when the first season of Stranger Things came out or whatever, and you watch it with your parents and you were kind of freaked out, and now you're a little older and you're an established teenager, wouldn't you love this movie?
Well, I was going to say yes. I think teenage me would have been terrified of this movie.
I mean you now.
Teenage Maggie
shorter.
was... No, I've been this height since I was 15. Cam, that's when I stopped growing. But no, I think what you're talking about is an idea I was having. This you're saying like, Stranger Things is for everybody versus Possum, which is for a specific type of audience.
You and me.
Yeah, like liking weird, really unsettling shit. This movie is not full mass appeal of Stranger Things because it's horror, number one. Stranger Things is horror light, so
Right, but this is still a Blumhouse horror movie in a theater.
Right, yeah.
It's big.
But also I think it is really tailored specifically to people our age. I think it's for people who grew up in the 80s and 90s, who grew up with the Stranger Danger paranoia, like hardcore, and now are into true crime. Like that's who I think it's for. And so it appeals to me because I feel like that kid. I mean, even though I wasn't alive in 1978, that's a bit early, but like that Stranger Danger thing that was so prevalent in the 80s and 90s, like after, like even though child killers were around in the 60s and 70s, and of course before then, the like cultural Stranger Danger thing doesn't really come, like the kids on the milk cartons, that starts in the 80s and 90s, and that's what you and I grew up with. I mean, I had specific I remember, I can picture now my mom telling me when I'm like 7 or 8 years old, like about Stranger Danger, and like if somebody ever tries to like get you to go to their car, here's what you do, like here's all the protocols. And so you're terrified your whole life that you're going to be kidnapped. And so this, I think, plays with those fears, not only because it's happening to a child, but also because of that restrained violence and the lack of violence on screen. That's what you're used to as a kid, is you're imagining all the terrible things that can happen rather than actually seeing them happening.
Knowing the age
for the most part.
Knowing the age of the writers and the director, I think that's there in the creation of the film. But I really feel like the movie is supposed to be the next building block for the Stranger Things audience.
Yeah, no, sure.
I think
also
it's
the Stranger
marketed.
Things audience is our age. Do you know what I mean? Like it's not for
I
age.
don't think so.
You think it's more like Gen Z?
I heard someone make a spirited argument yesterday that Stranger Things was the closest thing that Gen Z had to Harry Potter.
That's okay. That's fair. Yeah.
A long-running
so
franchise with a group of young kids and kind of cyclical adventures with a big bad.
Fiction. Yeah. Okay, that's totally fair. So maybe it's not quite. I just know a lot of people our age love it.
But they're used to the kind of period piece revelry. And I think the thing that started this germ of an idea in my head was something from the film. I think it's an important marketing strategy to get people early. In the same way, like if my mom hadn't showed me all the Adam West Batman and then every other iteration of Batman, I wouldn't care now.
Yeah.
But now I cry every time I see the new Batman movie because of the highway chase. And it's like everything that's cool in Batman that I grew up with and everything I wanted to see there. And you feel a connection to how old you were when you first got into it. And I feel like those building blocks are priceless. I mean, that's Disney's entire marketing strategy. But the movie, it's a conversation where Finney is talking to Robin. And Robin's telling him how he has to go see Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And those movies as like inflection points or cultural landmarks for you that really set the bar and move you into a new genre or just raise the stakes for you for how art can affect you.
Yeah.
I feel like that's why this was almost a graduation party for the Stranger Things crowd.
Yeah, no, definitely. And again, I mean, it's just playing with these like more adult themes. I mean, of course, there's a kid missing in Stranger Things too, so there's that crossover, but this is like the more, again, this is not the horror light version. This is a bit darker.
I also think our little theories there are totally compatible.
Yeah.
Shooting for more than one market.
They go hand in hand.
Right.
Exactly. I think that's why this movie will have mass appeal.
And it
appeals to the millennial who likes true crime. It appeals to the Gen Z who like Stranger Things. It appeals to people who were actually alive in the 70s, So
and isn't that a hallmark of great works of art that different generations, different demographics can get different things out of it?
And when your protagonist is a kid. Like, that's even more interesting.
Which usually repels me.
Yes. Yeah. But
so,
this is like successfully defeating the argument that your character has to be your exact identity in order for you to relate to them or sympathize with them. Yeah, I mean, that's never made any sense to me. Yeah, no.
I identified with Hermione because she liked books and only had 2 friends.
Yeah.
So talking about the main characters for a second.
Yeah.
If Sinister was a kind of a mono story with Ethan Hawke versus the monster, and he was trying to puzzle that out. And basically that was the movie. Everyone else was at best a supporting role, and I love that like laser focus. That's always spoken to me.
Yeah, I like a really intimate movie. I think that's great.
I've always longed for stories without B-plots. I know that they add a lot and they add an emotional resonance. You get the echoes across storylines.
But there's something special about...
I just like things that are just...
When you're following this one character, you get super invested.
Totally.
Yeah, that's really special.
And the curveball here, compared to Sinister, compared to a lot of other horror that you and I like to talk about, is that we have two heroes here. We have the brother and the sister, or I'm calling the dynamic duo.
Yeah.
And I was so surprised when the lights came on and the movie ended that they were the best part of the movie.
I was going to say, Ethan Hawke is obviously incredible.
We will get to him.
But he's only in he's probably on screen for a grand total of 10 minutes.
Sure.
Like he's barely there because it's almost like a
cameo. But not in a bad way.
No, not in a bad way at all. It's very effective. But yeah, the kids who are playing... The kids, Mason Thames is playing Finney and Madeleine McGraw is playing Gwen. They were so incredible. And, kid actors, it's hard because they're kids and they don't, and I know a lot of it probably has to do with how the adults are directing them and how the script is written, but
they can't all be Rupert Grint. Is there anyone more charming or charismatic? He's so funny little Rupert in Grint, every scene.
I know, he's so good. But yeah, these kids were so good, and I cared about them both so much.
Right.
And a lot of times when you see they're this really strong, if you haven't seen the movie, a really strong brother and sister pair. Finney is a little bit older than Gwen, but they're really close siblings, right? A lot of times when you see that in movies or TV, it's kind of cringy. You're like, no siblings were that close. Like, what is that? You don't believe it. But I fully believed the relationship that these two had.
And that relationship really heightened the stakes. Because obviously, whenever a kid's a protagonist in a horror movie, you're very invested because you don't want the kid to die.
Yeah, but also you don't want the sister to be sad about the kid.
Exactly. It doubles down, and it gives the rampant violence in the movie. And I don't mean on-screen violence all the time.
No.
But there's this sense of violence.
The implied violence and the violence that has occurred.
Right. It's the street fights with the kids. It's the 70s, so it's the rampant domestic violence with the dad. And to make another comparison to It, the kind of crescendo of It Chapter 1 has Steve kill his abusive father.
Isn't it? It's
or what's his name?
Henry.
Yeah. Henry kills his abusive father.
Yeah, the bully kills his dad.
It gives the film, or at least his character arc, a kind of surreal catharsis. Because you're having a kid who's being bullied and abused by a parent, and then he sticks him with a knife.
Yeah,
and
it's really great.
That's a bad thing to do. But as an audience member, I think people cheered in the theater I was in.
Oh yeah,
it gives it a sense of kind of catharsis to wrap it up and rebel, and they win against the oppressive, whatever it is. And there's none of that here. It borrows certain aspects from It. The adults are mostly evil. The kids are all grimly funny, probably because they exist in that much rougher world. But there is no fantastical retribution. Even the father's apology at the end of the movie is optional.
Right.
He's not begging, he kind of is, but it's more of a plea.
Yeah.
Totally. He's reaching out to his kids. Yeah. He's not ordering them to accept the apology and shaking their hands.
Yeah.
And that role reversal at the end, which is so slight but important, it makes it feel more real. It doesn't make it feel written and clean and fake.
This movie is incredibly grounded, and I think that's one of my favorite parts about it, because even though there are two supernatural elements, two major supernatural elements to this story, it all feels so believable and so grounded. And part of that is the brother and sister relationship and the actors and the writing. But it's also, again, it's the restraint with the violence, and it's the stuff that's based on the plot points and characters who are based on real things. Like the grabber is very much based on a combination of serial killers, which we can also talk about. You look like you want to say something.
I have a little more on this.
That's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, I just, the groundedness, having kids be the lead of the movie, but not taking it easy on them. I always go back to, we had an air hockey table when I was a kid, and my mom never let me win. So she just beat the shit out of me for 15 years until I was good enough to win. It wasn't 15, but it was a while.
Yeah.
And she had like the tongue sticking out of the corner of her mouth, and she would move the puck way faster than I could react. And, and that puts a little hair on your chest as a young man. Mm-hmm. And I feel like there are a lot of stories like we talked about at the beginning of kind of art that doesn't give a shit, that puts all these dumb rules of characters can't face any hardship, or your characters can't be bad or messy or problematic, or that means you're saying all people of that demographic are bad. Or, those fucking stupid rules that are infesting art right now. There's none of that shit here. Right. And because the kids are facing actual hardship. I mean, it's not just a street fight, a disagreement about someone pulled my ponytail at recess. She hits a kid in the head with a rock.
Yeah, and he's like gushing blood
from his head. He has a head wound,
and she gets punched in the mouth. And it's
real
serious
stakes,
violence,
real violence, real hardship.
Yeah,
which invests you in the movie.
Yes, right.
And I just love that this creative team so neatly danced around all of those stupid ass rules and just made something that can be sold until the day they die.
Yes.
That they can sell for the rest of their lives.
Exactly.
It just feels like they're swinging for the fences here. And as much as I love the rigid focus of Sinister with just one character against, supernatural weird odds, having a dual protagonists here gives the story more variety. It gives it more bounce in the narrative, so you can echo between things. And I thought a lot in Sinister. I was scared more in Sinister.
Yeah.
But this one made me cry.
Yeah. This one's much more emotionally investing. Because in Sinister, obviously you care so much about Ethan Hawke's character, our protagonist. You want him to succeed. You want his family to be okay. But you're not emotional at the end, or really at any part. You're just upset
and like you said,
unsettled. But this one's much more emotional.
Right. Like you feel bad for the kids. But like you said before, you feel bad for one kid feeling bad and worrying about the other kid.
Right.
There's that kind of gravy hitting all the, the food on the plate,
right?
Where it kind of bleeds together. And seeing the practical aftermath of an abduction, once one of the kids is taken, you see the reaction of the other kid. You see the psychological effect on. You see the grief and the longing and trying to reach out and talk to an absent family member.
Like giving our main character context for the conflict that he goes through. It's not just about him getting kidnapped. Is he going to survive? It's about how his sister feels. It's about the other hardship he's experiencing. It's about him seeing this happen to other kids. It's about his whole life. It's not just about this one incident that he faces, which will of course be the most pivotal thing he'll ever experience in his life. But but giving a context and widening the scope,
And another, I guess, minor spoiler, seeing the sister's reaction after Finney is taken, seeing her try to talk to him, make these appeals to God and try to search for him, it talking to absent family, talking to absent friends, that expression of grief and distance is a perfect echo to Finn talking to the previous abductees on the phone.
Exactly. I was going to say to go back to your comparison to Sinister, instead of one main character, it's two. In Sinister, and the reason we're comparing again is because it's the same creative team. You have to compare. And the movies feel so similar. In Sinister, it's the regular guy against versus the supernatural. Right. The supernatural is the evil. Here, the evil thing is a guy, and the supernatural is the saving grace. That's how they're able. That's the force of good is the supernatural. So it's a reversal, especially just in most horror films when there is a supernatural element. It's usually not good, and it's usually us trying to combat that. And this is a flipping of that, which I think is so interesting.
That's a great point.
I think it's how it keeps it feeling so grounded. Because instead of spooky ghost is killing you, it's real dude who exists in the world, and lots of dudes like him exist, is trying to kill you.
Right.
How do we combat that? What sort of things do we lean on in these horrific beyond horrific scenarios?
And there's something incredibly optimistic that it's you thinking that the main character is going to survive this and escape at the end. It's not this something's got to give, the world's a good place ultimately. It's certainly not that.
No.
It's just this sense of teamwork and love that builds up, because he has his sister in his corner.
Yeah.
He has all of these other previous victims in his corner.
Yes.
So they're all just pushing in the same direction. And it's that sense of family and love and determination that also reminded me a little bit of why the first Conjuring movie had such an effect on me. Because it was the strength of that marriage.
Yeah.
That invested you in the story.
Yeah.
And every time one of them went into a spooky room, you were worried because you didn't want the spouse to be sad.
Exactly. Like, you're not just worried about Patrick Bateman. You're worried about...
Patrick Bateman.
Oh, shit. Patrick Wilson. Oh, I'm always concerned about... I'm literally reading American Psycho right now. Sorry. Patrick Wilson, but you're also concerned about his wife and what she... Like, how that's going to affect her. Uh-huh. Yeah. Sorry. I do the... It's like my Peter versus Percy Jackson. It's a curse.
That's right.
Can we also talk about serial killers?
Yes, and then we'll go into The Grabber.
Great. Okay, yeah, it'll be a nice, easy, happy transition. I mean, again, obviously this movie is playing on our own, like, real-life childhood fears of stranger danger, of, like, the serial killer... This is the worst way to say it, but the golden era of serial killers, which was the 70s and 80s, right? Like pre-DNA testing. So everybody was getting away with shit left,
Forensics,
right, and center.
And media weren't there.
Exactly. Like pre-cell phones, pre-media. Exactly.
So you thought it was safe for the kid to walk 8 miles home after school because no one would ever find the van or the kid.
Exactly. So, and also I meant to say a second ago that that groundedness, you also believe, this is a spoiler, ending spoiler.
Well, I haven't seen the movie.
Okay, well, the fact that, again, spoiler, Finney is able to escape and kill the grabber. Mm-hmm. That is hard to believe, that a 13-year-old child could kill a psycho killer and escape this mega dungeon soundproof basement. But it's not just him doing it. Right. It's the collective supernatural effort of the sister and the dead kids in the past. So that also helps it, even though that's a supernatural thing, it feels more believable because he has that extra oomph. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and he doesn't defeat him in hand-to-hand combat.
Well, right.
He's a scrappy boy.
He outsmarts him. Exactly. And so, but again, so I mean, this killer, the grabber, is obviously based on real dudes. Like, and it's like this wonderful piecemeal of all these different killers. Mm-hmm. The most, I think, natural comparison is John Wayne Gacy, who's the clown.
The clown? Yeah.
The clown killer, the one who killed young boys and buried them in the crawl space of his home. So there's obviously crossover
clown
there.
Clown thing works with the mask and the face paint.
Exactly. He, you know, the grabber is pretending to be a magician and he wears a mask. And so then, of course, John Wayne Gacy was a clown. So there's that crossover, and of course with the kids, and it was always young boys too, which is and then also, I don't know why I feel like I have to point out that I think what serial killers did was horrible. You guys know I'm not
on this podcast. We disown serial
I am not pro killing people. Gotta say, Jeffrey Dahmer.
You're not supposed to get political on the podcast.
Jeffrey Dahmer, who also he killed young men and boys, and also one of his, again, spoiler, one of Jeffrey Dahmer's victims escaped and was then recaptured. Same thing happens with Finney. Is that
a spoiler alert for Jeffrey Dahmer?
No, it was a spoiler alert
in case he's listening?
For the movie, because Finney escapes and is then recaptured.
How's he doing, Jeffrey?
Finney? Jeffrey? He died in prison.
Okay.
Long time ago.
So he's not listening?
No, he is not.
He's not going to email in?
He is dead. But he did have a radical conversion to Christianity at the end of his life.
And did that make the victims' families feel better?
No, I think he was killed in prison. So.
Oh, okay.
And then also the comparison here is to Ted Bundy, who did not kill young boys, but adult women. But Ted Bundy would often do the blundering thing, like to a distraction, a ruse to get women to get into his car. Yeah. So this similar thing happening here. So it's taking, and then there's more and more comparisons abound. So there's all these like real world elements, and again, it's the scary blacked out van, and this is weird. I loved the abduction scene, not because it made me happy, but because it was so quick. Like, I feel like a different kind of movie would have, like, taken its time, built up a lot of tension, made it this long, drawn-out, dramatic scene, and it was just, I mean, we knew it was bad because we've seen that van before. We know it's him. Finney doesn't know. It's, oh, I dropped my stuff. Do you want to see a magic trick? And then Finney's like, are those black balloons? Boom, he grabs them.
You know what it reminded me of?
What?
The mallet scene in Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Absolutely.
Which is mentioned in the film.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It has that just boom, done.
Yes. And because that's how it is. You see, and you see the grabber look around. You see him make sure no one's watching before he does it.
It's shocking without being at all violent or explicit.
Exactly. I mean, it's violent in that he's grabbing a child, but it's not like, there's no blood. There's no, like, it's not over the top. Like, it's how it would be. And that makes it even more terrifying rather than it being and hyperbolic.
So many of the abduction scenes you see after Finney's are in the dream vignettes from the sister.
Yes.
And seeing all of those with kind of filters on them because they're layered through this sort of dream visual language, they started to remind me of the found footage segments of Sinister.
Totally. Yes. Like you're not really seeing all the violence. You're either not seeing it at all or you're seeing it in these like brief snippets where you're not really sure what you're seeing.
Right. The crime is detached and stylized and obscured mostly.
And again, that's because, again, this is kind of a spoiler, Finney himself does not experience much violence. He is kidnapped, and that's a violent thing, and he's sprayed with something so his eyes hurt, and he's like starved and like trapped in this terrible basement, but like he doesn't face a whole lot of violence, and so he's instead left to imagine the violence that these other kids experienced, and so he doesn't get to see it, so neither do we. Like, we're very much in his POV the whole time, and I really liked that, because you see all the kids on the phone talking to him, you see them after they've been killed, so you see them with their injuries and their blood and all that, but you don't actually see what happened to them, so you're just left to imagine, which I think is more scary, and is also how we thought about these things as kids, was because, again, most of us were not actually seeing any real violence, but we were just imagining it and were terrified of the possibility of it. I said something to you when we left that I kind of want to rethink, and this is going to get icky and sad, and I'm sorry, but I think it's part of the movie.
Oh yeah.
I said when we left, I said, I'm glad that there wasn't a sexual element to it. Like, we didn't see the grabber molest any kids, or it didn't seem like that was part of it. But
no. Yeah,
go ahead, sorry.
No.
Well, after thinking about it, I'm kind of reconsidering that.
Okay.
I think that element is there. And I think it's intentionally ambiguous. I think the evidence, the case, if I want to build a case that it actually was there, well, first I'll say we don't know if it's there or not, because number one, the police don't know, because the bodies of the already dead kids have not been found until the end. So we have no way to know if there was any sexual assault. Number two, we don't see anything happen to Finney. But that's also because the kids who are dead warn him not to do things, so he's able to avoid a lot of contact with the grabber. And the kids also don't say how they were killed or tortured or abused or whatever. They just kind of say it was bad, or he took his time, or like, we don't actually know how any of these kids died, right? Like, we never learn the specifics, do we?
No.
Yeah, right. So either there was no sexual component, or the kids don't have the vocabulary for it, or they just don't want to talk about it, like, obviously. So at first I just thought it wasn't there, but I think there is some evidence to suggest that it is. Number one, when Finn wakes up and he asks why the grabber's in there looking, like, staring at him, the grabber just responds, "I just wanted to look at you," which is nice. Also the naughty boy game that some of the dead kids mention and all that, which could have that element to it, but it's hard to say. Then also when the grabber is sitting with the belt and he's like shirtless, like, there's that. And because at first I thought, like, oh, he only kidnaps kids because they're easy targets, but he only kidnaps boys. Right. So that suggests there's some kind of preference. Like, I don't know. I'm also not a pedophilia expert, so I don't know, but I'm saying, like, I'm really speculating here, so I have no idea.
The way I read it was that he was... It's strange because we see one scene of him talking to his brother, and he talks like a normal adult. So he can code switch
the grabber can
somewhat to blend in and be a normal
There's
adult.
A suggestion of a split personality, especially with the masks.
But
and stuff.
Whatever the dominant personality is, I mean, there are so many moments where he's so schmaltzy and sweet and weird that it feels like he's doing like a little boy impression.
Yeah, sometimes.
And it felt like he was kind of living in that headspace. Where
so at that point he's not an adult who like wants to
it doesn't have a sexual impulse, so and I think you get some of this from his clothing, where he's like wearing like weirdly soft and colorful clothing sometimes when he comes down. The mask is obviously hiding his face, there's no tell there, but some of the times it feels like he's coming down for just because he's lonely, or to just, like, when he gives him the food.
And he's adopting different voices, too. Like, he doesn't use the same voice. And also, the different iterations of the mask suggest that he's feeling different versions of himself or of other people at different times.
But the anger only comes out. The anger only comes out when one of the boys is going to leave. Yeah. So I feel like that's him almost in this little theory. If he's switching from being a young boy who's looking for, like, friends so he the one of the other personalities like traps them, basically procures them for him. That's kind of this caricature of an abusive, gruff father.
Right.
Which is why he sits at the top of the stairs like the father of that time with the belt.
With the belt. And we've already seen Finn's own father use a belt on his children. Yeah.
So if the Ethan Hawke character, he's got the gray hair and everything. So he's at that like dad age.
Yeah.
He knows what that looks like, but it feels like mentally most of the time he's still in that little boy place.
Yeah.
I feel like he's bouncing between those. The adult version of him makes this happen. And then the little boy part can live in that for a while.
Yeah.
And it's protected and secured by that angry adult growly version of him. Because it felt like such a weird parody for him to be sitting there with the shirt open holding the belt. It looked like a Homer Simpson kind of parody of fathers at that time.
Sure.
Like it looked like F is for Family.
Yeah.
With a mask. But comparing that to when he's downstairs and he's doing like a Peanuts impression.
Right.
That's how I read the split in that personality. And I was sort of relieved that there wasn't a pedophilia element there.
Yeah, or at least,
it felt like the expected thing.
Well, exactly. That's initially why I said I was glad it wasn't there, because that feels like, not only because it means I don't have to think about a pedophile, but also because it's just easy. Like, it's kind of lazy almost. Yeah. It's in the way that the Nightmare on Elm Street remake made Freddy Krueger a child molester instead of just a child killer.
Yeah, it feels cheap.
Yeah, it's like, you just, let's make it one step further, So I like that it's, like, but regardless, I like that it's ambiguous.
Yeah, sure.
Like this whole movie is. It's very ambiguous. It's very, like, understated, restrained, and so we don't know all the answers. And that's...
restraint. That's a good transition. If you don't have anything.
Well, I guess there. I also let's talk. I want to talk about the grabber for a little.
No, me too. That's what I was.
Well, it's about his like the different roles that he takes on.
Sure.
A question I have for you is: do you think that the grabber was abused as a child? And this is all speculation. There's no way to know. But
yeah, I mean, maybe that could explain.
Because I think he was, and I think that's part of what's going on here. Because we know from the kids that, again, big time spoilers, but if you're this far in, whatever, the grabber can hear the phone ring.
Well, one of the kids says that on the phone.
But
that doesn't mean it's true.
But also, the grabber says that he says to Finney, like early on, he says it spooked him the first time he heard it ring. So he's heard it ring before. Yeah. So can he hear it now, or did he perhaps hear it as a child when he was down there? Like, I wonder if there was some sort of abuse with his father where he was trapped down there and something happened. And now that he's older, that cycle of abuse is continuing in probably a much more extreme way.
But also, if he doesn't sexually abuse the boys, but he does abduct them, like if you, this is another kind of personality that's happening there, keeping the boys in the basement. If him sitting at the top of the stairs with the belt could either be locking them in so they don't leave, or in some fucked up way, like protecting them so they can't get molested.
Interesting.
So he's acting out like a better version of his father, but also the kid version of him is then relating to them.
Interesting.
But he's keeping them in this like frozen in time, Dragonfly and Amber kind of thing, where just nothing happens to them. And then eventually they die down there?
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe they starve, maybe. Like, that could be another interpretation, I guess.
Totally, yeah. Because, again, it's never revealed how these kids die. I mean, it seems like they're probably killed more violently and faster than just starving to death, because he tends to go through victims pretty quick, and also a lot of them have, like, severe injuries, so it's clear that they were attacked in some way violently. But, yeah, there's no way to know. And I think that's also kind of interesting. And we're not going to get a full resolution, even if for some reason there was a sequel, because he's dead.
But
so we're never going to know.
The art that we like, because not all art that we've consumed in the last 2 years have we brought to the podcast.
Yeah. Wow. What?
The ambiguous stuff, and I don't mean the ending has to be completely unresolved.
Yeah.
But stuff with a bit of ambiguity or suggestion or nuance, that's the stuff that keeps you thinking.
Yes.
So none of these interpretations have to be true at all.
Yeah, no. I don't ask that question so that we'll come to a conclusion and that's the final answer.
But giving you some sort of food for thought is good.
Yes.
And I love that it had sort of a light touch in that area, because it could have become a movie about a pedophile. And that does feel so expected and almost cliche.
Yes. I feel like this is similar if we want to go back to the It comparison. Pennywise in many ways resembles and reminds us of a child killer, especially with John Wayne Gacy because he's a clown. But there's the kids experience, especially Beverly, experiences sexual or sexually oriented violence from her father and from all the boys at school. So like that element is there, even if it's not like Pennywise equals pedophile. Like it's more complex and nuanced and ambiguous and messy than that. And that's kind of what's happening
and
here.
Universal.
Yeah.
Because then Pennywise becomes like a Bogart.
Well, exactly. Yeah. And in some ways that's kind of what the grabber is as well, because he has these different personalities that he takes on.
And it's crazy that we're having such a long conversation about the grabber, because the one defining trait for the character and Ethan Hawke's performance as a character is restraint.
Yes.
It's crazy coming off of Sinister, where he's in almost every scene, and he's utterly a protagonist. Yeah. And he just does the bulk of the work there.
Yeah.
And he's absolutely not the lead actor here, like he was in Sinister. But if you continue that comparison a little further, Ethan Hawke is Bagul this time. He's the bad guy.
Right.
So he has as fleeting and occasional a role as Bagul did in Sinister. It's a light touch. It's an extremely memorable performance, but most of them are in these little basement visits. But even then, most of the time that Finney's in the basement, he's worried that the grabber is going to show up, but he doesn't.
And so are you. That's why I was so stressed this whole movie, because he kept popping out and showing up. You have no idea when he's going to come back.
You get a couple meals and a couple visits with a different mask. Most of the basement time, Finney's alone.
Yeah, or talking on the phone with the spirits of the dead kids.
Right, so you get a couple visits from the grabber, but mostly besides that, you get static shots of him with the belt upstairs, and you never see that acted upon in any meaningful way.
You never see it actually happen. You just imagine it.
It's the waiting. The static shots in these little dream vignettes kind of doubling down on all of these other abductions. So he's not this big... I mean, he's not even like Bagul is in Sinister. He doesn't even have that big a role, because he's not this huge Mephistopheles with a plan and a contract and this kind of flirtation with, seducing, stealing the soul of whoever the protagonist is.
Yeah.
It's not that epic. It's much, much more subtle. Basically, he beats the kids if they try to escape, and eventually he kills them. That's as far as the plan goes.
Yeah.
And it's the lack, for me at least, it's the lack of a plan beyond that that makes him so scary and unpredictable, because there's a sense once Finney's in the basement, it's like the dog catching the car. Because the grabber doesn't really do anything after that.
No, he like the kids tell Finney, like he's waiting for Finney to play his game. And they're saying you can't lose if you don't play his game.
But he's so terrifying in his introduction, in the abduction, in the first couple appearances once you're in the basement, that the plateau for the next hour of the movie is so scary.
Yes, right.
Because it is that building tension, that rising action.
And again, we haven't seen or heard of the specifics of the violence that he acts upon. So you're like, you don't know what to expect. So your imagination is just going wild. You're like, what's he going to do? Is he going to torture him? Is he going to assault him? Is he going to, like, what's he going to do? Like, is he going to starve him? Like, what's going to happen?
It's just, and you were so tense next to me. And it was because of that dread, that tension, where it's a left turn like I've never really seen in horror, where you just put your villain on ice for an hour after building him up to be mortifying. And it engages the audience in such a perfect way, where we're forced to parse every minor change to Ethan Hawke's voice, eyes, hair, or the masks. And so you're incredibly engaged in doing all this detective work. It makes the movie so collaborative.
Yeah.
And by the end of the film, I guess, minor spoiler, the grabber never becomes a supernatural metaphor. No. He doesn't become Pennywise the Bogart at the end. And there's no sequel bait. Right. It's perfectly resolved, and he's just a really bad dude.
Yeah, right.
Which makes it more of a commentary on human nature than it does about the cosmos and a giant turtle.
Well, and I think having him have the brother, I think, is also so important, because if it's just the guy alone, he's like this enigma, and he could almost be this supernatural force. But because he has this human brother who's literally trying to solve the case and has no idea that there's a kid in his basement and that his brother is the grabber. Like, it makes you realize, like, yeah, it could be any dude. It's just a dude. And that's like,
and that isn't
more
a consolation. Scary. Yeah, like
right.
It's not like, oh, okay, he's not an intergalactic spider person. He's just an evil psychopath who abducts children.
I was gonna say, who lives in your neighborhood.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, that's scarier
and hides in plain sight.
Than a demon.
Right. Exactly. And his brother doesn't even know, lives in the house with him.
Exactly. He's in the house and has no idea. Like, but that's the scariest part.
The fact that you can make that almost like a letdown in that you're not powering up the character, but it doesn't feel like a letdown for the audience.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like a relief.
No, it makes him even scarier.
It becomes much more grim.
And because that's how it is in real life. Like, these serial killers are not easy to identify. Like, Dennis Rader was a normal dude, or we thought he was, and then turns out he wasn't. Ted Bundy was this charming, some people, I don't know why, but some people thought he was handsome and like he was this normal guy, and just kidding, no, he wasn't.
Yeah, it was so grounded and grim and possible that instead of reminding me of it by the end of the movie, it reminded me of Prisoners.
That's a great movie.
The movie with Hugh Jackman, it's Denis Villeneuve. It was Jake Gyllenhaal and Hugh Jackman and the Riddler from Batman. What's his name?
I don't know his name.
Okay. Paul Dano.
Okay.
Yeah, and that was another movie. It's a guy who's it's a bunch of dads in this neighborhood, and their daughters are taken, and Jake Gyllenhaal's the cop who's trying to investigate it, and Paul Dano is the guy who took the daughters. And eventually they have the guy, but I mean, the movie doesn't end with a supernatural ending.
Right.
And it's incredibly grim and possible and lived in.
Yeah.
And even though there are moments of kind of surreal visuals and things you've never seen before, it feels so dirty and depressing and real. Kind of like the difference between True Detective and something like Stranger Things.
Yeah.
Like, kids are in danger in both situations, but there's something grimy about True Detective. There's something like you need to shower after that.
It's more nihilistic. And,
And I think it becomes more nihilistic as it becomes more grounded.
Right, exactly. Because Stranger Things, I feel, and again, I've only seen one season, so maybe this is unfair, but it feels almost romanticized. Like, it's a bit... I mean, again, it's just a different type of show. It's a different audience.
But also, the Demogorgon isn't living in the apartment next to you.
No, it's in a literally different dimension. Like, that's whatever.
But the grabber could be.
Exactly.
Which makes it
the
more
grabber is just a guy in
scary.
Your town who keeps taking kids. Yeah.
So I have one element left to talk about for the movie.
Yeah.
It's the puzzle box nature. And we've been talking about this with a lot of these horror movies and Summerween.
Yeah.
I wanted to spend a little time on the basement.
Okay,
because I think it is such an incredibly thought out setting, and it felt like as the movie wrapped up, we had wrung every drop out of that towel.
Yeah,
it was fully explored.
Yes,
every inch of that basement or cellar or whatever you want to call it becomes an opportunity or a plot beat.
Yes,
it's genuinely the best, most fully realized horror setting since the Saw bathroom.
Yes, I was going to say, we talked a bit about this in our Hush episode, which hasn't come out yet.
That's why I didn't reference it.
But I'm saying, keep an eye out for that when we talk about Hush.
Yeah, next Tuesday we'll do that again.
Yeah.
But like, compare this to Saw. In Saw, you have the key in the bathtub, the cassette tapes, this poisoned cigarette. Here you have the combination to the lock, the hole in the ground, the freezer, the toilet lid, the hidden cord. It's these grimy, industrial aesthetic real world elements, like things that are not interesting, that are absolutely everyday items, that are MacGyvered and engaged into the story.
Yeah.
The environment feels so curated and artificial. You know that Jigsaw has put all of these little pieces in place so that these two guys work through them in the right order, get the tapes in the right order. And that would feel so fake and bullshit in any other genre for something to be that curated and staged.
Yes.
But in horror, when you have someone abduct people and put them in an artificial setting, then it becomes a perfectly reasonable mystery story.
Exactly, yeah.
And you know the bad guy is the game maker.
Yes.
It's why the Hunger Games work.
Yes. And again, I thought it was believable how he's able to get through like all those elements and end up outsmarting the grabber in the end, because number one, he has the help of the kids who set a lot of that up for him before. But number two, early in the movie, Finney is established as this guy who's really good at math and wants to be an astronaut and thinks like a scientist and thinks in that very like analytical left brain problem solving way. And so to establish him as that, you totally believe that he could figure out like how to like stuff the cord up the rolled up rug to get it over the grate of the window. Like I would never think of that, but like I have a different type of brain than Finney does.
It's
so
really
it makes
important.
A lot of sense.
Yeah. And it reminded me of Saw as well, because the villain's there the whole time.
Yeah.
And you get all these
Spoiler.
reveals about him later.
Yeah.
But it, like you just said, it engages that there's a close reading impulse that horror rewards that no other genre can touch. Because like we talked about in Funny Games, when you're trapped in one location, you have these 10-minute shots, you're staring at one simple room. You're looking through all of those elements. The poker near the fireplace becomes a weapon.
Exactly.
You're churning all of these elements and resources over in your mind. And when you establish the character, like you just pointed out with Finney, it makes the characters feel properly industrious, smart. It makes them feel believably desperate. But also, like we're going to talk about next week with Hush, it confirms to you, which is the only consolation you need in horror, that the writers and their characters are at least as smart as the audience.
Exactly.
So you're not screaming at them to not go in the room with the chainsaw guy.
You're not like, you idiot, why haven't you tried the window?
Right. Why would you hide in the dark cabin? It's in the woods. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's just a bit smarter.
And it's respecting the audience. It's not either patronizing to the audience or the audience being so annoyed at how dumb the characters are.
Yeah.
Like it's trusting the audience to be on the same level as the characters.
It's like you're taking a toolbox and dumping it out all over this one setting, and then trusting the characters and the audience to just play with all of it.
Right.
And it's so meticulously well plotted and well crafted.
And so then you feel like you're working with Finney to try and figure out how to get out of there.
Exactly.
And so then you're more invested and you feel more connected to him.
Exactly. It makes the story collaborative. And there's an echo of that within the narrative, where he's got this supernatural help from the previously abducted boys, which almost becomes the voice of the audience.
Right. So it's just like this like collective team effort. And that really builds, I think, very well at the end with the dreams of the sister connecting. And I really loved the moment when, first of all, I knew that when Finney escaped the first time that wasn't it.
Oh, sure.
Because he hadn't heard from Robin yet.
Yeah.
Because I knew he would have to hear from Robin, the latest victim and his like close friend in real life. So I knew that. But I loved the moment with Robin when he's teaching Finn how to use the phone as a weapon.
Yeah.
Like it's just like him like doing the motions with him, and Finn couldn't see Robin, but we could see him and them doing the motions together. Like it just felt really special, and like it was like all these collective things coming together. So we felt like we were part of that training montage, right? Like we were part of that effort.
And it had a touch of the Mike Flanagan sad ghost effect that makes you cry at the scary stuff.
Yes, right. Like the dead kids are obviously terrifying, but they just become sad at the end. And it's the most brutal thing.
Yeah. This was just a spectacular movie.
Yeah, it was
It was a great horror movie, and it was a great movie for everyone else. It was just perfectly well made.
This is one that like I want to watch again because I feel like I'm going to get more out of it. I'm going to catch a lot more things. Obviously it was upsetting, but like it's one that I feel I can watch again versus Funny Games that I don't ever want to watch again. But
and there's just a satisfaction as the credits rolled of they swung for the fences.
Yeah.
It was just killer.
I also really want to read the story. Like I'm really excited to read the story and to report back on that. I did forget to mention Mark Corvin did the music for this movie.
Yes, he did.
Mark Corvin did the music for The Witch and The Lighthouse, which are some of my favorite. I mean, The Witch is my favorite movie.
We both
of all
gasped.
Time. we're like, Mark Corvin! He got so excited. And the music was really good. It wasn't like as striking as the Robert Eggers projects, but also those movies are so like specific and niche and like period, so it's just different.
It was just beautiful,
but it was really good. So anyway, just shout out to Mark. That's all I have. All right. Lock your doors, stranger danger, don't get in black vans.
Okay, bye.